prophetic saying, "None of you truly believe until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself."
وبص على خريطة العالم واكتب على كل بلد وكل مدينة علامة إن احنا نفتح في المكان ده كله.
I think Dr. Hany is one of the great philanthropists, one of the great humanitarians of our current times.
Dr. Hany El Banna, for services to Islamic relief.
Hany El Banna.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear viewers, welcome to another episode of the With Dr. Hany program. This episode is about the presentations that were published on Dr. Hany's Facebook page, Training and its role in developing humanitarian resources, presented by Dr. Sayyid Al-Zannari, Governance and its role in developing the resources of civil society institutions, by Dr. Tariq Afifi, Learning and Knowledge Management for Humanitarian Organizations by Dr. Abdrabbi bin Sahra, and finally, Advocacy, Donor Policy Change by Ms. Leila Hisso. Dr. Hany, you are welcome.
يا أهلا وسهلا أهلا وسهلا again. Good to see you.
Let me first, Dr. Hany, recall the richness that all participants in the Global Dimensions of Humanitarian Work Forum touched, and the excellence in the presentations of a group of distinguished leaders and cadres. Through your experience, Dr. Hany, does this outstanding performance reflect institutional maturity, or is it only an individual efforts of some distinguished models of humanitarian workers, such as Dr. Sayyid, Dr. Afifi, Dr. Abdrabbi, Ms. Hisso, and others?
Alhamdulillah, to be very honest, during these 3 days, most of what the distinguished speakers were talking about was something I was thinking about for years. And alhamdulillah that we met in the middle without any planning. What we have done is just send them the title of the talk, not the details about manner, about history, about research, about governance, about culture, about philosophy of thinking, about media, about international work, all this. Alhamdulillah, and they spoke, or actually, as we are actually having an orchestra singing the same, or composing the same symphony. Regarding to what they mentioned in their presentation, all of them, it is individual maturity more than institutional maturity, unfortunately. Some of them actually are like freelancers, they work alone, and some of them are a part of organization, and the gap between them and their organization is like this. In the intellectual capability and the thinking forward. And this is something which we need to realize, that some brains inside the organization are ahead, far ahead of their own local or international or global organizations. Yes.
Okay. In his presentation, Dr. Sayyid talked about the difference between service and experience, al-khidma wa al-khibra. He also said that training is what transforms service into experience. Let me, Dr. Hany, ask you in general about the reality of the interest of Arab and Islamic humanitarian institutions in training and qualifying their cadres in order to achieve this experience that Dr. Sayyid spoke about.
Unfortunately, the budget for training and capacity building in most of the Arab organizations are very minimum. Very minimum. Even I struggle so much when we organize training workshop or capacity building workshop and try to fundraise. They are not interested to do that. This is an attitude and this is a philosophy of thinking, unfortunately. Not only for the training and capacity building, but also for the research. The research and communication and networking. Because networking and communication needs budget as well. So nowadays, most of the people, unfortunately, Arabs and non-Arabs, or Muslims and non-Muslims, are very busy firefighting. And firefighting means it's responding to disasters, responding to armed conflicts. And because nowadays the fundraising become easier than 30 years ago, people are very much directed towards fundraising than actually doing this actually tedious and difficult training work. So we still need to highlight that an employee which does not have a capacity, which is not very well trained, will be a burden on the organization and could lead to become a part of the corruption of the organization and wasting the resources of the organization.
Okay, let me ask you about Dr. Tariq Afifi's presentations, and it was about governance. There are those who understand governance as systems, laws, and work rules. But Dr. Tariq Afifi referred in his presentation to a comprehensive concept of good governance, al-Hakama al-Rashida, as he calls it. What are, in your opinion, Dr. Hany, the elements of good governance?
Most important element is the behavior of the people, especially the leadership. If the leadership does not become a role model, you cannot implement any law or any regulation. You see, Allah has revealed the Quran in 23 years. We have got millions and millions of copies of Quran at home. But who is going according to Quran? Who is, as Hazrat Aisha was talking about Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as كان خلقه القرآن أو كان قرآنا يمشي على الأرض. His manner was Quranic, or he was a Quran, a walking Quran on earth. His enemies used to trust him, to respect him. Never said anything bad about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he was a role model before becoming a prophet and after became a prophet. A man of justice, credibility, integrity. That's why everybody loved him and everybody followed him. Before bringing the laws and the regulation which happened during the time of Hazrat Umar, when he started to build the structure of the Muslim states in Medina. So at that time, it was governing by role modeling, governing by example, governing by coexistence and living together, transparency, government by fairness and treating people equal, governance by being the first to take the responsibility and the last to take the reward. This was the governance that Brother Tariq Afifi was talking about. This is like the spirit of governance. The law and the procedures and the regulation is very dry, or are very dry. You can't make them effective unless you make them very wet to come together and to put the spirit of this regulation in the behavior and the conduct of the leadership. Without good behavior and good conduct of the leadership, forget about the law. It becomes like penalizing or rewarding. Very, very dry, and does not let any organization stand on its feet. It is needed, but mostly we need the spirit to be inside this regulation. There's something called in Arabic, there is روح الدستور ونص الدستور. روح القانون ونص the spirit of the constitution and the statement of the constitution, the spirit of the law and the statement of the law. So you have to balance between the spirit of the law and constitution and the law itself as a text.
When referring to the internal challenges of humanitarian institutions, we usually talk about financial resources, as you mentioned, and human resources training, as well as governance. But what is the location of interest in knowledge?
Knowledge.
Are our humanitarian organizations interested in knowledge management?
Some of the organizations do not understand what you mean about knowledge, what you mean about data, what you mean about information, because it is becoming very philosophical and higher level of discussion for their level. The most important part in the success of any organization is to collect the data. Then to change the data into knowledge, and then the knowledge becomes the procedure or the product that actually you are going to deal with. The data is the raw material, which is like the gold in the sand, or the sand gold. Unless you go to the gold mine and take this sand gold, then refine it, it will never become gold. So from the raw material to become gold, and the gold then become afterwards necklace, rings, belts, bracelets, and others, or be used in different areas. So this process of raw material or data, then information, then knowledge, then product is a process of maturity inside the minds of the organization to be able to create this knowledge. And here we give the example of the social media platforms who are using the raw material. The raw material there in Google, in Facebook, in Wikipedia, in TikTok, in Instagram, in Telegram, in WhatsApp is your information. They took it and now becomes multi-billion-dollar industry. Because they know how to manage this knowledge and this data and this information.
The presentations, which were very important, included important messages for humanitarian workers. Dr. Sayed, for example, spoke about psychological conditions such as Stephen Covey's rule, sharpening the saw. And he spoke also about the DPD, which is, or PDP, which is the Personal Development Plan. He stated also that change comes from the person himself. Dr. Abdrabbi also directed humanitarian workers to not seeking job security, but seeking career development. what is your message, Dr. Hany, through these messages to humanitarian workers in this regard?
Yeah, if the English proverb say, if you have a well, you have a way. So as maybe if you remember, Mr. Asad Taha said, don't send me someone who's not interested in media to train him. I don't want him. Okay? If this personal development does not come from yourself, you will never climb the ladder. You will never rise in your career. You will never be promoted or somebody else promoting yourself. The personal development may be your self regulation, your self education, and your self learning as well. So this personal development has to become a desire from the employee, and they are right. Who come for a job will never develop himself, but to come for a career, he will be looking out at now I'm an officer, tomorrow I'm a manager, next week I'm a senior manager, then become a director, then become CEO, then become chairman, then become global, then because these people look at a career. Now I'm qualified from university with a degree of history, with a degree of architect, with a degree of agriculture and water and sanitation. When I'm going to produce new theories and make new laws to govern all this, it is, as I mentioned in the meeting, the humanitarian work is like a pyramid without a peak, without a pinnacle. The more you rise to the top, the more you find that your top has another top, and the top has a third top. Because community development and community change and community growth is by the second. It's not by the minute, it's not by the hour, it's not by the day, by the second, and it's multidimensional, cross-cutting, and very diverse. So the more you rise, the more you find that actually your level still need to be higher and higher and higher and higher again and again and again and again. And there's no end and there's no top. There's no peak. There's no pinnacle for your pyramid of humanitarian or social work. Because you are dealing with human being, and the human being problems and desires are changing by the second.
That's right. Let's talk about Miss Leila Hissus' presentation, advocacy and its tactics. She referred to advocacy as a way to change policies and not just a way to bring in funds. Do humanitarian organizations rely on these means and tactics?
Some Western humanitarian organizations have got very strong, effective advocacy departments or divisions. Most of the Arab and Muslims do not have such a department or such a division, unfortunately. Unfortunately. Advocacy, as she said, could be a mean for fundraising, but also a mean of protection, a mean of spreading the knowledge. And the word advocacy, as I mentioned before in many of my talks, is written in the Quran. I remember that Mrs. Laila Hesso said that advocacy was a process that she learned about 9 years ago, while advocacy is in the Quran more than 1440 years ago. In the Surah Al-Ma'un, رأيت الذي يكذب بالدين فذلك الذي يدعو اليتيم ولا يحض. Al-Hadd is to spread the news about the miskin and the needy and the hungry. The word Hadd mentioned in the Quran 3 times. One of them is Surah Al-Ma'un, second Surah Al-Fajr. I can't remember the third surah. So advocacy is to stand up in the middle of the storm and the middle of the challenge and to say you are wrong. Advocacy, when you remember the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that the khair shuhada, the best of shaheed, martyr, is the one who stands in front of a tyrant ruler and said that you are wrong. Okay, this is advocacy, because such an individual is standing for the rights. Advocacy should not be done individually by one organization alone, or to be like a feather in the middle of a storm. ريشة في مهب الريح. A feather in the middle of a storm will do nothing, will have no impact. Advocacy should be made by the collective. I remember 15, 20 years ago, when I was heading Islamic Relief worldwide, when we had a great advocacy idea, we used to send it to 50 or 100 organizations. Give them the right to review it, to edit it, and send it back to us. And instead of us as Islamic Relief sending our statement, our idea, to say, hey guys, this is our idea, we are the first, wrong in advocacy. This is wrong in advocacy. We send to our partners, the 50 or the 100 or the 200, ask their opinion. To ask them as well, if they agree, they can sign the message with us. So instead, one organization signing the advocacy statement could be 30, 40, 50 organizations. Because advocacy messages could be very powerful, political, economical, social messages. This is number one. You have to do through the collective. There's quite a few ways of doing advocacy for yourself, for your organization, for your community. Either you do it yourself by your own organization, or you do it by you as an individual, the weakest as an individual. Individual cannot make the big advocacy campaign. Very rare that he or she can make that. One organization can have the right to do that, but could be very dangerous, because such organization may be working in a certain country that actually their message is making advocacy against the regime in the country or the corruption in the country. The automatic result will be closing down of the office of the organization. This is number one, do it as an individual organization. The second option is to do it with the collective, as I mentioned, to find an organization like an umbrella organization. Such umbrella organization give her the statement of advocacy and ask her to send it to all its members and to come from the members of the organization, not only from your organization. The third one, when you do it through an agent, an agent which is specialized in advocacy without mentioning your name. So their outreach will be far more than your outreach, and you'll be safe and working in this country. So advocacy can have 3 or 4 strands: individual as a person, individual organization, collective of organization, and a specialized company to do the advocacy on your behalf.
Returning to the issue of governance, the presentation of Dr. Tariq Afifi, if you were allowed, for example, to visit an institution at all levels of leadership, medium and field, what are the indicators of the optimal level of good governance in this institution?
We have an Arabic say إذا كان رب البيت بالدف ضارب فشيمة أهل البيت الرقص. If my father is playing on the drum, myself and my sisters and my mother will be dancing. This is actually the top, you see. And that's why the leadership training, leadership motivation, leadership direction is extremely important and vital. It's not good enough to keep sending me young officers to the workshops. And even when we make special workshops on training for the chairman, for the directors, they don't come. They have no time for you because they think that they know more than yourself. And this is a sign of arrogance. Actually, when people say that this is specialized for the CEO, chief executive officers, for the director level, for the chairman level, they have to come to learn, because there's no end of learning. There's no end of collecting data. There's no end of changing the data into information, into knowledge, into product. Okay? So we have to convince the leadership to keep learning every day, and training by training as well as we should not ignore the younger generation that actually will learn through many strands. First of all, they learn from their experience, hands-on experience. Second, they will learn from the leadership, which was them. Then they will learn from the training. So while we are trying, it's not good enough to train the junior staff, and the senior staff do not have any training. We need to bring the gap between the junior, the middle, the senior, and the top leadership, to bring these gaps together. So it should become like a learning organization. A learning organization is an organization that the top is teaching the top leadership is teaching the lower ranks, and the lower ranks is learning from the higher and teaching even the upper ranks. This is going around, up and down, according to the learning organization. So it's not good enough to train the middle officer or the junior officer, but it has to be both. It has to be both to be effective.
Well, speaking about leadership, allow me, Dr. Hany, to show you a short tape and then comment on it.
Okay. I know that.
He takes full responsibility for his job. This is the highly effective doer. He has immense willingness to work. With correct guidance and training, he will be a good performer. Here we see the PTA's potential trouble source. This is the suppressive person. The suppressive person, especially if undetected, is a very dangerous trait to any organization.
Sure.
Learn how to precisely differentiate between productive and destructive people. Well, what is your comment, Dr. Hany, on this tape?
the most dangerous three members of the team are the one at the back, actually, who is actually making all this trouble, hiding, wish-washing, backbiting, criticizing the organization, hurting his colleagues. The second one is the one who is sitting on the wheel, actually taking it as يعني, no role for himself, become a burden on the organization. The third one is the one inside the cart, actually sitting for a job. يعني, he flows with the flow, actually. And these are the three most dangerous characters in any organizations. Actually, because the leader was busy leading the organization, he did not realize that other organizations are ahead of him. When he discovered that the other vehicle is running faster, he has to stop, to look back and reflect, analyze the performance of the company one by one. And this is what to call it a performance indicator, or this is what to call it 390 on everyone. 390 analysis on everyone. So he found that actually one of them is useless. He threw him out with the one at the back. The second one who was sitting on the wheel, he changed his job description. And the third one was sitting inside the cart, he changed his job description as well, to try to let all the three of them to push in one direction. This is what happened at Nokia in the 90s. When they discovered that they are out of date, they did not have corruption, they have money, they have people working there, specialized, but they did not understand the continuous change around them. That's why younger organization managed to be effective, more effective than them, and went through the technological change and became ahead of them. Because the leadership did not realize that they're out of date. Out of date, that means that you're out of performance.
It's through training, governance, and knowledge management that these institutions can achieve safety, stability, and no struggle situation. Allow me, Dr. Hany, to ask you another question regarding the level at which change could occur first. Dr. Sayed, in his presentation, gives priority to leadership training. Dr. Tariq also said boards of directors must be well selected, and if change does not start from them, do not expect it to come from the base. Do you agree that the leadership level is the first to change?
This is a challenge, but it is a true finding by both Dr. Said and Brother Tariq Afifi. It is absolute right, because if you get a leader who does not know, who does not have a vision, he is not a leader. A leader role is to create the flow and let the people to follow his flow or her flow. Manager is to manage the status of the organization. And coming back to manager and leaders, even we give titles to people as directors. The word director means you direct the organization to this direction or this direction or this direction or this direction. Director is not a manager. Most of our people in different organizations call themselves directors, call themselves chief executive officers, but they are doing the job of the manager. They are doing the job of the manager. So we need somebody to tell them you have to change your job description. Then somebody to coach them, to mentor them. But this is not enough, because mentoring the leadership is good, but at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, we have to keep training the younger generation and make a system inside the organization of bringing or building the future leader of the organization, the future leaders. So while we are training the senior staff or the senior leadership, we have to carry the other program from the volunteers, from the junior officers, from the middle officers to actually bridge the gap between the trained, highly qualified leaders and the middle and the junior manager leaders, inshallah. I add onto it is while you are training the top, you have to train actually the lower rank ones.
The other levels.
Yeah.
Dr. Abdrabbi talked about considering the context factor in the knowledge management process. Dr. Tariq also referred to the effects of the surrounding environment on governance. My question, Dr. Hany, how Arab and Islamic humanitarian organizations can innovate more effectively and with less dependence on the possible disruption at Shwish of the political, societal, and cultural contexts that surround them?
Yeah. If Arab in the West are different from Arab in the Arab countries. Arabs in the West, some of them are unfortunately still having the same mentality of the culture of the countries they immigrated from and come to UK, come to Germany, to France and others. And some of them did not learn enough. Actually, how the organization or how the community is changing and developing technologically, socially, philosophically, culturally, morally, and others. And they kept themselves living in ghettos, في حواري، يعيشوا في حواري مع بعضهم. Even some of them, if you go to France, you find some of the Arabs don't speak French. Okay? If you go to Spain, some of the Arabs don't speak even Spanish. Same for Portugal. If you come to UK, some of the Arabs do not speak English. Same in Germany and others. Those will never make any change. But unfortunately, some of them are leading the organizations. Okay. So the surrounding or the al-bi'a, the atmosphere around you is shaping your culture, is shaping your philosophy of thinking, is shaping your ideology. Actually, because you have been impacted by what is mentioned around yourself in positive way or in negative way. But if you isolate yourself and live in a ghetto, you will be living in the last century. The context that you have to create has to be practical. You do not bring a context which is not applicable to the community. It has to be a balance practically. You cannot just come and say, I have a great idea from Harvard University, from Oxford University, from Lisbon University, from Washington, whatever it is, university, and from London University, or Manchester, or Cambridge, or Oxford, and just put it in this culture, in this atmosphere. Could be in Egypt, could be in Yemen, could be in Syria, as if you are bringing a seed or a tree, actually, which is suitable to be planted in sub-zero temperature, and you plant it in a hot Africa. I gave you an example. Can you plant banana or mango tree in Siberia, in Russia? The answer, no. No, but because of what? Because of the atmosphere, the temperature. Actually, it's sub-zero. Neither the banana tree will grow, nor the mango tree will grow. So the context has to be modified and applicable. Some people say that you are not ready for democracy. We come and tell him what kind of democracy you are talking about. Democracy was known in Africa and India before Europe came out as Europe, before America was discovered. before Latin America was discovered. So what do you mean by democracy? Democracy was in Africa under the tabaldi tree, the 200-300 years old big tree, either after midday or before sunset. And people used to come and discuss issues with the leadership of the village. You talk about democracy in a boardroom, for this is your call. But democracy did not start only in Europe or America, because Africa has been monitoring and following democracy for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. This is the context inside the atmosphere which you talked about.
Allow me, Dr. Hany, to show a comment received from one of our
عليكم
followers.
ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
خديجة
سؤال
صالح
للدكتور
from
هاني.
Tunisia.
في الآونة الأخيرة أي في السنوات الأخيرة وبعد خاصة ما عرف بالربيع العربي شهدت دولنا العربية وبالتحديد تونس ظهور طوفان من الجمعيات الخيرية. لكن هذه الجمعيات أو القائمين عليها تنقصهم الخبرة والتجربة في هذا المجال من ناحية، ومن ناحية أخرى يفتقدون إلى جسور تواصل بينهم وبين المنظمات العالمية الكبرى المانحة على غرار منظمة الإغاثة الإسلامية وغيرها من المنظمات الكبرى. فسؤالي دكتور، باعتباركم مؤسس منظمة الإغاثة الإسلامية وعامل بالقطاع الإنساني العالمي، ما هي النصائح التي بإمكانكم أن تقدموها لمثل هذه الجمعيات لكي يتواصل نشاطها الإنساني؟ وشكرا.
Khadija Saleh said, during the Arab Spring, many humanitarian institutions appeared, but they lack experience and lack bridges with donors. What advice can you, doctor, give to such organizations?
First of all, it is a very healthy sign, because allow young people to make their initiatives, to build their organizations, and give them the space, give them the liberty, give them the civil liberty space to expand their activities and regulate them. When Khadija, أختنا, our sister, have her baby, and he came out as a boy or a girl, the baby will not know what's surrounding. She will have to take him by the hand for years till she sent him to school, and from the school, primary school, to secondary school, to university, till become independent. This exactly, the baby is like these organizations. You need a lot of hand holding. But what we need to provide them with enough civil liberty space to grow, beside the regulation. This is very important. The other point, actually, during the Arab Spring, during any uprising or any social change, the priority is communication, 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 and networking. We have to communicate with our neighbors in the same street, in the same area, in the same town, in the same village, in the same district, in the same country. Without communication, we'll never know what's happening next door. So make communication and networking as a priority. And this communication will be with relevant organization like yourself or initiatives, or in a normal status with the government, in a normal status with the embassies, in a normal status with the international community. So without communication and networking, you cannot develop yourself. Besides, the most important thing in this is how big is the civil liberty space around you. سعة الحريات للمجتمعات. This is what we need. If the communities will feel that there's certain freedom, they will excel. They will develop, they will fly high.
Inshallah. Let me ask you one last question regarding the humanitarian work license, which Dr. Sayed talked about. And you also talked about repeatedly. What is, Dr. Hany, the necessity of this license? How do you imagine the possibility of activating this license, and who is eligible to adopt it?
You see, it's not only giving accreditation, giving the stamp to the organization. First of all, you have to put the regulation. The regulation that you need to obtain such accreditation could be 10, could be 15, could be 20, could be 30 points. This is number one as regulation. Then you ask this organization to invite you to bring an expert to investigate the organization from inside, to see their performance, see their structure, see their behavior, and see all these sort of things. And after this expert sitting inside the organization for 2 or 3 weeks, he will come and say, yes, we give accreditation to this organization, or no, will not give the accreditation to the organization. This costs money. This costs money. In some areas, it might cost 15,000, 20,000 euro for one organization, and should be renewed every year or every 2 years according to our regulation. Will the organization be willing to pay this amount of money actually to be accredited or not? This number one. But before that, I think Dr. Sayed or Tariq was talking about who should be humanitarian worker. People come jumping on a bandwagon and taking photographs here and there and distributing food here and there without knowledge, without experience, without actually understanding the context of what do we mean by humanitarian work. That's why we need to make a training program to give a certificate to the qualified people who knows what do we mean by humanitarian work, as program, as policy, as procedures, as governance, as knowing the relationship between organizations and others, and all these sort of things, and has working in a conflict zone or a non-conflict zone, working in a disaster-stricken area or a non-disaster-stricken area, and all these sort of things. What was happening nowadays, because it's easy in the West to get an organization to be registered, is anybody or any group of people can register an organization and can start this fund without any knowledge, without any training, without any experience. And this becomes a big problem on the whole sector, unfortunately. That's why accreditation is one thing which is very important, but believe me, it's not going to be less than 15,000, 20,000 euro for each organization. The second one is training actually the young people to become a humanitarian and social worker.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Hany, for these valuable comments, and many thanks to you, our valued followers. During the next week, we will be on a date with valuable presentations about inspiring experiences in humanitarian work. So be with us. Until then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
خالد الفقراء عشان تسعد.
Dr. Hany was a strong believer in the prophetic saying, "None of you truly believe until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself."
وبص على خريطة العالم واكتب على كل بلد وكل مدينة علامة إن احنا نفتح في المكان ده كله.
I think Dr. Hany is one of the great philanthropists, one of the great humanitarians of our current times.
Dr. Hany El Banna, for services to Islamic religion.